Detective Marcus Williams had been on the force for 12 years. He'd earned his shield through dedication, hard work, and an unwavering commitment to justice. On this particular Tuesday evening, he was off duty, dressed in jeans and a hoodie, walking through downtown after picking up groceries from the corner store. The air was crisp, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. Marcus was thinking about the case he'd been working on, a string of robberies in the commercial district, when he heard shouting behind him. "Hey! You! Stop right there!" Marcus turned around, confused. Two patrol officers were running toward him, their hands hovering near their weapons. The lead officer, a stocky man with a red face, was Officer Derek Hutchins. His partner, a younger woman named Officer Sarah Chin, looked equally tense. "Put your hands up, now!" Hutchins barked. Marcus's heart sank. He knew exactly what was happening. He'd seen it 100 times, experienced it more than he cared to count. But tonight, he was tired. Tired of the assumptions, tired of the fear in people's eyes when they saw a black man in a hoodie. Still, he complied. "Officers, there's been a mistake. Shut up. Hands on your head." Hutchins interrupted, advancing aggressively. "I'm a police detective," Marcus said calmly, slowly moving his hands toward his pocket. "My badge is in my..." "Don't move," Hutchins shouted, grabbing Marcus's arm and spinning him around forcefully. What happened next occurred in seconds but felt like an eternity. As Hutchins tried to force Marcus against a nearby car, Marcus instinctively resisted, not to fight, but to maintain his balance. Hutchins interpreted this as resistance. Without warning, Hutchins drove his fist into Marcus's ribs, then followed with a punch to his jaw. The impact sent Marcus stumbling backward, his grocery bag spilling onto the sidewalk. Apples rolled into the gutter. Milk splattered across the concrete. "Derek, wait," Officer Chin started, but Hutchins wasn't listening. He grabbed Marcus again, this time slamming him face-first against the hood of a parked car. Marcus tasted blood in his mouth. His hands were wrenched behind his back, and he felt the cold steel of handcuffs clicking around his wrists. "We got a call about a suspicious person matching your description," Hutchins growled in his ear. "Breaking into cars in this neighborhood." "I'm Detective Marcus Williams," Marcus said through gritted teeth, his cheek pressed against the cold metal. "Badge number 47823. 3rd Precinct. Major Crimes Division. My badge is in my right front pocket." Hutchins paused. Officer Chin stepped closer, her flashlight beam catching Marcus's face. Recognition flickered in her eyes. "Derek," she said quietly. I think he might be telling the truth. I've seen him at the precinct." "What?" Hutchins scoffed, but his grip loosened slightly. "Check his pocket," Chin urged. Carefully. With rough hands, Hutchins reached into Marcus's pocket and pulled out the leather badge holder. He flipped it open under the streetlight. The gold detective's shield gleamed, and below it was Marcus's police identification card, complete with photo and credentials. The color drained from Hutchins's face. The silence that followed was deafening. Hutchins stood frozen, the badge holder trembling in his hands. Officer Chin closed her eyes and whispered something that might have been a prayer or a curse. "Uncuff me," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. "Now." Hutchins fumbled with the key, his hands shaking. The moment the cuffs came off, Marcus turned around. His jaw was already swelling, and there was blood on his lip. He took the badge holder from Hutchins and clipped it to his belt. "Detective Williams, I didn't know," Hutchins stammered. "You didn't know?" Marcus interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "Or you didn't care to know? You didn't give me a chance to identify myself. You saw a black man in a hoodie and assumed I was a criminal. There was a call about suspicious activity, and what exactly did I do that was suspicious? Walk down the street carrying groceries?" Marcus gestured to the spilled food scattered across the sidewalk. "When you got that call, did it describe anything specific? Or did it just say black male, hoodie, a description that could fit thousands of men in this city?" Hutchins couldn't meet his eyes. Officer Chen stepped forward. "Detective Williams, I recognize you from the precinct. I've seen you in the briefing room. I'm so sorry this happened." You should have listened," Marcus finished. "I told him I was a detective. I told him multiple times. But he chose violence first." A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, phones out, recording. Marcus was suddenly aware of the scene they were making. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside him. "What's your badge number, Officer Hutchins?" Marcus asked, his detective instincts taking over. 5-5-8-9-2, Hutchins mumbled. "And how long have you been on the force?" 8 years. 8 years, Marcus repeated. 8 years, and you still haven't learned that everyone deserves the basic respect of being heard. That force should be a last resort, not a first response. He turned to Officer Chen. Did you run the description from the call? Did dispatch give you any details besides race and clothing? Chen shook her head slowly. The call was vague. Suspicious person near parked cars. Male, black, wearing dark clothing. That was it. And on that description alone, a description so broad it could apply to me, to hundreds of innocent men, you too decided I was your suspect. You didn't observe me committing any crime. You didn't see me near any cars. You just saw me walking. Marcus pulled out his phone and called his captain. Captain Rodriguez? It's Marcus Williams. I need to report an incident. I was just assaulted by one of our own officers. The next hour was a blur of flashing lights and urgent conversations. Captain Maria Rodriguez arrived within 15 minutes, her face a mask of fury and concern. Internal Affairs was notified. Statements were taken. Photos were snapped of Marcus's injuries, the swelling jaw, the bruised ribs, the scraped cheek. The following days were difficult for everyone involved. The incident had been recorded by multiple witnesses, and the videos quickly spread on social media. The headlines were predictable and painful. OFF duty detective assaulted by fellow officer, police brutality. Victim was one of their own black detective beaten after being racially profiled. Officer Derek Hutchins was immediately placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The department launched an internal review not just of this incident but of Hutchins's entire history with the force. What they found was troubling. This wasn't the first time Hutchins had been accused of using excessive force. There were 3 prior complaints, all from Black and Latino civilians, all dismissed or resolved with minimal consequences. There were commendations too, arrests made, cases closed, but a pattern emerged when you looked closely enough. Detective Williams, meanwhile, became an unwilling spokesperson for a problem the department had long tried to ignore. He gave one interview to a local news station, and his words were measured but powerful. I've been a police officer for 12 years, he told the reporter. I've dedicated my life to serving this community, to protecting people, to upholding the law. But in that moment, when Officer Hutchins saw me, none of that mattered. My badge didn't matter. My service didn't matter. All he saw was a black man, and he made assumptions based on that alone. What do you think needs to change? The reporter asked. Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. We need comprehensive training in de-escalation and implicit bias. We need accountability, real accountability, when officers abuse their power. And we need to acknowledge that this problem exists. Because if this can happen to me, someone who carries a badge and gun, imagine how much worse it is for civilians who don't have that protection. 3 weeks later, the Internal Affairs hearing took place. The conference room at police headquarters was packed with officials, union representatives, and witnesses. Marcus sat on one side of the long table, his lawyer beside him. Across from him sat Derek Hutchins, flanked by his union rep and attorney. The evidence was presented, witness statements, video footage from multiple angles, the dispatch call recording, Hutchins's history of complaints. The videos were particularly damning. They showed Marcus complying, trying to explain, and Hutchins responding with immediate aggression and violence. Hutchins's defense was predictable. He felt threatened, he was following protocol, he couldn't have known Marcus was a detective. His attorney painted him as a dedicated officer making a split-second decision in a potentially dangerous situation, but the facts didn't support that narrative. The videos showed no threat. The dispatch call had provided no evidence of any crime in progress. And most importantly, Marcus had repeatedly identified himself as a police officer before any physical contact occurred. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he stood and addressed the room. His jaw had healed, but the memory of that night remained fresh. I'm not here seeking revenge, he began. I'm here because what happened to me happens to countless people every day, people who don't have badges to protect them, people whose complaints are dismissed, people who are afraid to even report these incidents because they don't think anyone will believe them. He looked directly at Hutchins. Officer Hutchins, I don't think you're a bad person. But I do think you've been trained to see certain people as threats first and humans second. And that training, that mindset, is killing people. It's destroying communities. It's destroying the trust between police and the people we're supposed to serve. Marcus turned to the panel of officials. Whatever you decide here today, I hope it sends a message. A message that this behavior is unacceptable. That we're better than this. That every person, regardless of their race, their clothing, or where they're walking, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. The hearing lasted 2 days. In the end, the decision was unanimous. Officer Derek Hutchins was found to have violated multiple department policies, use of excessive force, failure to properly identify and assess a situation, and conduct unbecoming of an officer. He was terminated from the police force, effective immediately. Additionally, the the department agreed to implement new training requirements for all officers, quarterly implicit bias training, enhanced de-escalation protocols, and a stricter review process for use of force incidents. Captain Rodriguez personally oversaw the creation of these programs, determined to ensure that what happened to Marcus would never happen again, but Marcus knew better than to think one case would change everything. The problems ran too deep, the patterns too entrenched. Still, it was a start point. 6 months after the incident, Detective Marcus Williams sat in a community center in the neighborhood where he'd been assaulted. He was part of a panel discussion on police-community relations, alongside activists, other officers, and community leaders. A young black teenager raised his hand during the Q&A. "Detective Williams, after what happened to you, how can you still be a cop? Don't you hate them?" Marcus smiled sadly. "I won't lie, there were days when I wanted to turn in my badge and walk away. Days when I was so angry I couldn't see straight. But then I remembered why I became a police officer in the first place." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My father was a mechanic. Good man, worked hard his whole life. When I was 16, he was stopped by police while walking home from work. They accused him of stealing the tools he'd been carrying, tools he'd owned for 20 years. They didn't believe him. They arrested him, roughed him up. By the time everything was sorted out, he'd lost a day of work and his dignity. I saw how that affected him, how it broke something inside him. And I thought, I can do better. We can be better. So I became a cop, thinking I could change the system from the inside. And maybe I'm naive, but I still believe that's possible." Marcus leaned forward. "The truth is, we need good people in law enforcement. People who understand the communities they serve. People who see other human beings, not threats. If all the good people leave, if everyone who cares walks away, what kind of police force are we left with?" Another hand went up. An elderly woman asked, "But what about Officer Hutchins? Do you think he learned anything?" Marcus considered this. "I don't know. I hope so. I hope he takes this time to reflect on his actions, to examine his biases, to become a better person. But that's his journey to make. All I can control is my own actions, my own response. I chose not to let what happened to me turn me bitter or cynical. I chose to use it as a platform to push for change. And I chose to stay in law enforcement because I still believe in justice, real justice, equal justice for everyone." The changes that followed Marcus's case weren't revolutionary, but they were real. The new training programs actually made a difference. Use of force incidents decreased by 30% in the following year. Community complaints dropped. More importantly, officers started speaking up when they saw their colleagues acting inappropriately. Officer Sarah Chin, who had been present during Marcus's assault, became one of the department's strongest advocates for reform. She worked with Marcus to develop training scenarios based on real incidents, teaching new recruits how to properly assess situations without jumping to conclusions. Derek Hutchins, meanwhile, disappeared from public view. There were rumors he'd moved to another state, that he was working in private security, that he'd sued the department for wrongful termination. Marcus didn't follow up on any of it. He'd said what he needed to say, and now Hutchins had to live with his choices. 2 years after the incident, Marcus was promoted to lieutenant. His first act in his new role was to create a special task force focused on improving police-community relations. He recruited officers from diverse backgrounds, people who understood the communities they served, people who had experienced both sides of the badge. One evening, he returned to the street where it had all happened. His groceries had long since been replaced, the spilled milk washed away by rain. But the memory remained, a scar that had healed but would never completely fade. A young black man walked past, hoodie up, hands in pockets. He glanced at Marcus nervously, and Marcus saw himself in that look, the wariness, the calculation of whether to cross the street, the readiness to prove innocence for a crime uncommitted. Marcus nodded at him. "Evening." The young man relaxed slightly. "Evening, officer." And he walked on, unmolested, unharassed, as every person should be able to do. Marcus stood there for a long moment, watching the street. The work wasn't finished. It might never be finished. But every day without an incident like his was a victory. Every officer who chose communication over confrontation was progress. Every person who could walk down the street without fear was a step toward the world he'd joined the force to help create. Thought about his father, about all the people who'd suffered indignities and worse at the hands of those meant to protect them. He thought about the responsibility he carried, not just as a police officer but as a black man in uniform, trying to bridge two worlds that too often saw each other as enemies. It was a heavy burden. But Marcus Williams had never shied away from heavy burdens. That's what made him a good cop. That's what would make him a good lieutenant. And that's what would, he hoped, make him part of the solution rather than part of the problem. As he walked back to his car, his phone buzzed. A text from Officer Chen, "Training session went great today. The rookies really engaged with the scenarios. I think we're making a difference. Marcus smiled and typed back, one day at a time. One officer at a time. That's how we change things. He climbed into his car and drove home, the city lights flickering past his window. Somewhere out there, someone else might be walking while black, shopping while black, existing while black. And maybe, just maybe, because of what happened to him and the changes that followed, they'd make it home safely. That was the goal. That was always the goal. To serve and protect everyone. Without exception.